So I believe that it should go without saying that Kurozumi Orochi, the current shogun, is not a good guy. I mean, it's straight up stated that he is a cannibal, that he eats people. At the same time, he is so cowardly that at even the hint of a small child possibly laughing at him, he feels the need to have her killed. I think that it's easy to hate him. I think that he is despicable, he is deplorable, he is not somebody that anybody in this country, it seems like, respects. But with all this being said, I don't think that in any capacity is the shogun a final opponent of anybody. And I also do not believe that he is responsible for 90% or more of the atrocities committed on a daily basis within Wano. Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, let's start this discussion simple. I mean, we've been talking about it for a long time, but Orochi just does not give a lot of vibes that he is of a significant villain within Wano, aside from the expectations created at the start of the arc. Not only is he not intimidating, but it also doesn't seem like any of the higher up people within Wano. I mean, we've seen Orochi in front of all of his delegates. They don't seem to respect him. Pretty much at every point in time that Oda has given him the opportunity to speak in front of him, they've been tempted to laugh at him. And when they are not inwardly and quietly laughing, then they are disparaging him. They're being condescending in a way. Is anybody important in Wano truly, honestly, and fully devoted to him, loyal to him? I'm not sure. It seems like a legitimate question. If anybody really is, it's not because of anything that Orochi is doing, it's because of Kaido. Orochi has basically used Kaido to solidify his rule. Without him, I think he's basically nothing. And so I personally am looking for a major antagonist from Wano itself, like a citizen, a resident, a person who is historically from Wano, to stand up and fight against the Strats in a very significant way. As far as Orochi, I just don't see him as being that person. To be completely honest, guys, when the chips are down, when Orochi may at any point become vulnerable, I would not be surprised to see his quote loyal subordinates abandoning him. The only thing that they would be worried about is hurting him and possibly incurring the wrath of Kaido. So if they're not the ones to do it, then they can just safely back off. But let's set the stage so that I know that you fully understand the situation in Wano, everything that is going on, so that you can better understand what my theories are about Orochi and why he may not be all that significant. To be completely blunt and to be completely honest, Wano is dying. As far as I can tell, 20 years ago in the past, Wano was a pretty decent place to live, but it wasn't until about 5 years or so ago that the pollution from Kaido's factories really started destroying the country. We get a little bit of this story through Tama, as 5 years ago or 4 years ago, her village was on the verge of starvation. At this point in time, I think we can presume that the water was beginning to become not drinkable, the plants, the vegetables, and food was not growing. They could no longer eat wild animals or hunt. There was just no source of food available to anybody who do not have access to these very protected and specific farms. So yeah, aside from these major cities, the leftovers, and the prisoners, everywhere else in Wano is dead. And so the question here that I want to ask, guys, really cutting to the chase, is, do you think that Orochi would be fine with the state of Wano as it is now? Based on my understanding of Orochi and things that he's said in the story, I think not. And so while this is not confirmed yet, guys, this is just my intuition, my perception of Orochi based on things that he said, but he hasn't outright stated it. But Orochi seems to me like a guy who holds a lot of pride for his own country. Orochi is a fan of Wano. He wants what is best for Wano. He said this line specifically to all of his delegates at his little party in the Flower Capital. Enjoy yourselves. This is Wano. Don't be tricked into thinking it's heaven. Eat and drink to your heart's content. This dude thinks Wano is like being in heaven. And I think that this is echoed from his line to Cypherpole earlier in that same chapter. Don't our people look so happy? Orochi is either delusional, living in some kind of dream world, or he may not be aware of everything that is happening in Wano. What it is really like. And so here's another line that I'm going to take a little bit out of context, but I think is really representative of who Orochi is and what he is like. These are the other geisha talking about him and Komurasaki. I wonder if Shogun Orochi has any idea of what Komurasaki's really like. for that beauty, he'll overlook anything. I think that you can make a fair argument that the beauty of the flower capital has allowed Orochi to overlook what Wano is really like. And I said this in my last review, and I'm going to go ahead and say it here again now because it is just as relevant. If ever we learn that Orochi has not left the flower capital in 10 years or more, what she might be tempted to do, then I would consider this idea almost essentially confirmed. His idea of what Wano is really like, his truth for Wano in present day, would be the flower capital, which is not at all representative of what the country is as a whole. He just assumes that the entirety of Wano appears just as the flower capital would, and he believes himself responsible for this. And so I think that this brings us back to the question that I led off with in starting this discussion. If Orochi became aware of all of Wano and everything that was going on in Wano, would he be alright with it? Would he be alright with Wano as it is? I don't think so. But with it being the way that it is, does it not suggest that even Orochi is being deceived, betrayed? So let's complete this story. In order to do so, you have to fill in some blanks, you have to make some assumptions, you have to make some speculations. But in my opinion, Orochi first ousted the Kozuki because of Oden's insistence on opening the borders. What you need to know and what you need to keep in mind is that Oden was the son of the former shogun. However, very young in his life, he was essentially kicked out of the flower capital and forced to the lawless region of Wano called Kuri. And from there, he essentially conquered it all, brought together all the various brigand bands, and then made it into a very lively place. He became their king, and his father anointed him as the daimyo of that area. We don't know this for sure, but I think that we can take a guess that around this point in time, when Oden was approximately 20 years old, essentially this part of Wano, Kuri, was open. The borders at that time were open, and Oden let people come and go. This is around the time that minks such as Inuarashi and Nekomamushi arrived in Wano. This is when pirates such as Goldie Roger, Whitebeard, and anybody else could have made a visit into Wano. Even somebody such as Dr. Hyoluk. We speculate that maybe he visited Wano. This would have been the time to do so. Approximately 40 to 20 years before the beginning of the story. At some point during the middle of all this, because Oden felt contained, he felt like there wasn't enough space, he decided to leave and join one of the pirate crews who happened to visit the Whitebeard Pirates. And then while he was a member of the Whitebeard Pirates, he was contacted by Roger and joined his ship, eventually returning to Wano at the conclusion of the Roger Pirates' journey. Again, this is not confirmed, but I would hazard a speculation that when Oden again returned to Wano to assume his role as daimyo, he was even more focused than before of opening the borders of Wano, not only in his own little territory, but across the entire country. He would have essentially, in my mind, assumed the role of Queen Otohime from Fishman Island, petitioning and pushing the country as a whole to change. And again, we don't know, but I would speculate that it was around this time that Orochi really felt as though the country needed to move in a different direction. They needed to eliminate the Kozuki to preserve Wano's future. Not because Orochi himself wanted that power, maybe he did, but he thought perhaps that this was best for the country. And you even have stories which potentially corroborate and back him up. It's important that we learned that Ryuma, the samurai who slayed a dragon, is hugely important to the country of Wano. He is their national treasure. But as we know, a little over 20 years ago, before the beginning of the story, his grave was robbed. And as was described to us, it was due to a pirate upheaval. Coincidence or not, it's suggested that this occurred very, very shortly before Oden was finally killed. I think that potentially you could argue that Oden allowed pirates into the country, and that it was during this time that Ryuma's grave was pilfered. So as far as Orochi and potentially the rest of Wano is concerned, it was the pirates who were responsible for stealing Wano's national treasure, and the person to blame would have been Oden. And I very much doubt that this is an isolated incident within the history of Wano. I think that it's suggested, at one point in time, Wano was called the Country of Gold. Where did that gold go? Orochi specifically states about how the celestial dragons and every force outside of Wano wants to take something from Wano. I think you could argue that they were already very sensitive about outside forces coming into Wano. Just to fill in the blanks here, guys, just so that we can reason some sort of motive or ideal of Wano for Orochi if the current Wano isn't what it is that he supports. As I mentioned in my first reaction in the last chapter, I think that he might want to recreate Wano as a country of gold, as a country of great wealth, while keeping the borders closed to prevent interference from outside forces who would wish to take that from them. But he would not do that at the cost of the livelihood of the citizens of Wano. He would not purposely poison and destroy his own country's beauty. So anyway, guys, I think that it's fair that at this point in time, Orochi would be motivated and in some ways potentially even justified to want to close the borders. And if you want to close the borders, you have to defeat the opposition who supports that, the powerful force of the Kozuki, the current shogun, and his son. But he may not have been able to defeat them on his own, even if many of Wano's own citizens would have supported him. This is where you see potentially Orochi turn to Kaido for help. But under this scenario, I think that this help would come with a huge caveat, that Orochi would say to Kaido, you can come and help, as long as you believe, as I do, that Wano's borders must be closed. And you must also support the growing prosperity of Wano itself. As I said earlier, guys, Orochi is a bad dude. He is not a good person, but I don't think that he has it out for Wano. In my opinion, guys, this current version of Wano is against everything that Orochi stands for. He's just not aware of it. Some of the things that we currently associate as the negative aspects of Wano are definitely on his shoulders, but not necessarily the results that he may have intended. For instance, kicking people out of the flower capital if they don't do something to help support Wano financially, if they don't make money. I very much believe that Orochi issued that command. He made that law. But he didn't know the kind of Wano that would help create. One of corruption and cruelty. And I don't think that he knows that at this point in time, there is nowhere else that anybody has to go. Because the land is poisoned and desolate. What this means, guys, and essentially what I'm trying to say is that Kaido has betrayed Orochi. Everything that he is doing now, I don't believe was part of his agreement and the reason why Orochi originally sided with him. But the only way for this to work, the only way to keep up the charade, would be if absolutely nobody is telling Orochi of what is going on. And this is precisely what the story is leading us to believe. There is actual law enforcement in Wano. Whether or not it is followed is a completely different question altogether. I believe that there is importance to the system of bribery established in Wano. Essentially, if you just do something wrong, if you do something illegal against the rules, you merely have to bribe the person who finds out or who is above you. And all of this works to prevent Orochi from discovering the truth. Because the people who he has surrounded himself with, the people that are directly below him, have all been bribed to allow illegal happenings. But at the same time, I believe that there must be a kingpin, the person who's at the top of the ladder holding all of the secrets. Aside from Kaido, I think that person is Kyoshiro, the very most powerful person in Wano right now. The person who is most aware of everything that is going on in Wano, with the most ability to do something about it, the most authority, and chooses not to. And I really think that this panel and this scene emphasizes this the best. Whenever Kyoshiro is actually talking to other subordinates of Orochi, other corrupt officials, and they seem amazed that he is able to call upon Queen whenever he likes in order to protect his investments and his territory. I think that this directly connects Kaido to Kyoshiro above any other official within Wano. It makes him special. It almost puts him on the level of Orochi. No, hell guys, it does put him on the level of Orochi. Remember, he is respected, he is feared, people are loyal to him because if they do something to him, if they mess him up in any way, then they expect retribution from Kaido's crew. They fear Kaido, but now the same is true of Kyoshiro. If they try to mess with Kyoshiro, if you want to set up a soba noodle shop in the wrong area of town, he's gonna call Queen. The others clearly do not get this treatment. And I wonder if this was purposeful by Kyoshiro to display this power, because he had an option. His subordinate told him you gotta worry about causing a scene, but he specifically sent Queen right into the middle of town. In my opinion, Kyoshiro is now officially as powerful, actually I think more powerful than Orochi himself. More powerful in the sense that he actually has loyal subordinates, and I think that he is in a possession of way more information and knowledge. Kyoshiro's fingers and territory is everywhere across the flower capital. He is the Yakuza, he has the most manpower, and therefore the most surveillance. If Kyoshiro decided to attack Orochi or wronged him in any way, and Orochi cries and he goes to Kaido to kill this man, do you think that Kaido is going to oblige? Why would he need to? I think it's already pretty much confirmed that Kaido keeps his secrets from Orochi because we haven't yet seen him mention Big Mom, which would be a huge deal. Also, we saw earlier Orochi had to speculate about the existence of infiltrators, Zoro, etc. That stuff Kaido already knew. Kaido's doing his very best not to bother him, or be bothered by him. If you consider everything that I said in this video, all these speculations about how Orochi may not be aware of everything that is going on in Wano and may not be okay with it, you could even argue that Kaido may prefer Kyoshiro over Orochi. That maybe he's played his role. And I think that there's other things in the story as well that might corroborate this and add to it in various different ways. We can see that Queen absolutely loved Komurasaki, and we know that the one responsible for her death, even if Kyoshiro was the one to pull the trigger, quote, is Orochi. Orochi ordered her death. And if Kyoshiro was prudent, he would make sure that Queen knew that. And I have little doubt that if the opportunity arose, he would do that. Which is really just honest. And then even to take this a step further, not only was the Shogun responsible for her death, but Kyoshiro would be the one potentially to have saved her, as she's obviously hasn't died. And many speculate that Kyoshiro did something or used some kind of power or something weird is going on that he knew that she would survive. What I'm trying to say is that the Shogun is not helping his relationship with Kaido's crew by ordering Komurasaki's death, but you can even take this a step further. Orochi's not doing any good for his relationship with his own people. They're talking about riots in the street. Would Kyoshiro ever have a better opportunity to seize power and control from Orochi? With literally no opposition whatsoever, because Orochi has become this hated figure from everybody around him. At this point, all that would be needed for this to occur is for Kyoshiro to reveal that Orochi is responsible for her death. I mean, you want to talk about the brilliance of Kyoshiro if he planned on taking the title of Shogun from Orochi, is to literally blame every wrong in this country on him while secretly having been a part of it all. And I think that this theory really has a bunch of extra layers because at this point in time we don't know whether or not this was potentially Kyoshiro's plan all along. To have Orochi kill Komurasaki. Is this entire scenario fabricated? Is Komurasaki complicit? In my opinion, guys, I think this entire story in Wano is leading towards Orochi not being all that significant and potentially being betrayed by his own loyal followers. And I believe that the true villain of Wano, the future Shogun, you could even argue maybe even the current Shogun, if not in name, is Kyoshiro. But yeah, guys, that is pretty much all I had to say today. Just some things to keep in mind because as the story is going forward, I really think that this is the direction everything is going. Definitely watch out for Komurasaki's funeral. But yeah, as always, share your thoughts in the comment section below. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike the video if you disliked the video. Make sure to subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content. And as always, guys, have a wonderful day.